Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back, Corey Hughes' Bloody History. So, we're continuing on with Mexico City. Oswald's alleged trip to Mexico City. And if you're not familiar with Oswald's trip to Mexico City, let me just give you the short version. Oswald never went to Mexico City. There you go. The much longer version is what we've been going over. Let me give you a middle-of-the-road explanation of Mexico City. So they're attempting to set Oswald up as a dissident and a communist, and that he's trying to get into Cuba and the Soviet Union again, even though he was already there, did nothing, and left. Right? So why is he going back? There's no reason for him to be going back. It's a big setup. So why is he going back? Sorry about that. But anyway, Kerry Thornley went to Mexico City. Kerry Thornley was the primary person involved in the setup. All of the Mexico City station CIA people, some of the most qualified people in all of the CIA, are completely fucking clueless. They're clearly involved with this somehow. You've got the statement of, was it Vesiana, who says that he saw Maurice Bishop with Oswald. Clearly he didn't. It was obviously Kerry Thornley, if that incident happened at all. And for the last, 2 months or so, we've been going over, a little more than 2 months, we've been going over everything Mexico City related. So today we're continuing on because Oswald, as it turns out, wasn't on a bus, right? So you have some conflicting information from different people who either claim to have seen a man who looked like Oswald on the various bus routes from Mexico City to, was it Monterrey, Mexico, and then to Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, right? So you have 2 bus rides, and then you have a different bus that takes you once over the border to Houston and then on to Dallas. But we know we have at least 3 or 4 days of Oswald sightings in Alice, Texas, on the way to Dallas, presumably. At the radio station, at the diner, a couple other places where allegedly Oswald was seen talking about his Russian wife and all this stuff. And the Russian wife, Marina, was with this person, right? So as to give credence that it was Oswald. But it seems as though many times in the setup of Oswald, they started to lay down a storyline, like the storyline, and I'll call them storylines for lack of a better word. The storyline of Oswald in Alice, Texas, I believe, was a trail they were attempting to leave, or Kerry Thornley was attempting to leave, but ended up not being used or relevant, and I guess they thought that it would just be forgotten in time. But so many people came forward in regards to the couple days surrounding Alice, Texas, which began on October the 3rd. But we know Oswald, well, we don't know, but allegedly Oswald was staying at the YMCA in Dallas on October 3rd. But I do have a problem with that. The problem I have with that is that Jack Ruby is alleged to have visited that YMCA. And if he was doing so, he wasn't going to see fucking Oswald. None of these people interacted with Oswald. Not David Ferry, not Jack Ruby. Nobody. Except Kerry Thornley and very, very, very possibly Clay Shaw. But that requires much more research, and I don't think there's going to be anything on that. But when it comes down to these various storylines that they started to lay down around Alice, Texas, and there's a whole bunch of others. There's another one in Baton Rouge. There are so many other times that Kerry Thornley was impersonating Oswald, laying down what would appear to be a storyline. But they never came to fruition. They were never used, which does nothing but pile up evidence against these guys, right? For creating these false scenarios in the first place. but none of them ever have made it to the official story. So in this situation here in Mexico City, it's fascinating because, and you have to forgive me, I don't know the names of all these people in Mexico City like I know everything else that I've studied. I've just gotten to this stuff. And so you have a bus passenger witness who allegedly saw a man he believed matched the photographs of Oswald, who was on that final leg of the trip from, was it Matamoros? It was Matamoros, not Monterrey. And from Matamoros to Nuevo Laredo. So we have one witness who saw an American that he believed matched the pictures of Oswald on that last leg. However, when the FBI talked to the bus driver and his number 2 guy, they switched off. Saucedo and Dionisio Reyna was the co-driver. Oswald's name appeared on the ledger for this bus, and with a seat number, but these 2 guys, the driver and his co-driver, swear that Oswald wasn't on the bus. So we have that conflicting bit of information between the passenger who thought he saw somebody who looked like Oswald and the bus drivers who say that Oswald was most certainly not on the bus. The interesting part is that the name Oswald, which is spelled O-S-W-L-D, it was like condensed. That name Oswald was put on the manifest by an employee who believes that it was, he added it to the list due to a phone call that was received from one of the travel agencies who was able to issue tickets for this bus line, even though it wasn't a direct ticket sale, right? So you've got someone calling in and saying, hey, put Oswald on the list. And so the guy puts Oswald on the list. We have somebody who says they saw somebody on the bus who was an American, who they thought looked like the picture of Oswald. But that doesn't really mean anything. That's going to be the weak link here. That witness will be the weak link here. Because I think the testimony of the 2 bus drivers really outweighs them, outweighs that other statement big time. So here we're going to pick up with the inquiry at the Flecha Roja bus terminal. On March 7th, 1964, Jesus Saucedo, comptroller of the terminal of the Flecha Roja Red Arrow Bus Company, number 45, Mexico City, advised that the full and complete name of the company is Servicios Unidos Autobuses Blancos, Flecha Roja, S.A. de CV, the Unified Services of White Autobuses Red Arrow Incorporated, and that it provides bus service to numerous localities within Mexico, as well as to Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, and Laredo, Texas. He explained that 2 trips daily are made to Nuevo Laredo and Laredo, where the line makes connection with the Continental Trailways bus system of the United States, departures from Mexico City being scheduled for 3:15 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. each day, and arrival at Nuevo Laredo 19 hours later. Saucedo advised that a passenger list is prepared in duplicate for reservations and ticket sales for a given trip. The original is carried by the driver, and the carbon copy is transmitted to him for final checking and auditing of the operation in connection with each bus. With the assistance of Saucedo, a search was made of the passenger manifests of the company for all trips to Laredo for October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1963, without locating any information identifiable with the name Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald's time of arrival in Mexico City. T12 advised as follows: on April 16th, 1964, Julio Castro, employee of the accounting department in the offices of the Flecha Roja bus line, made available the ledger of arrivals at Mexico City for the Flecha Roja buses. The ledger records separate entries for each day with the exact time of arrival of each bus in Mexico City at the terminal. This ledger disclosed that bus number 516 of the Flecha Roja bus line, which made the trip from Nuevo Laredo to Mexico City on September 26, 27, 1963, arrived at the Flecha Roja bus terminal, Mexico City, at 10 a.m. on September the 27th. Efforts to locate Flecha Roja passenger list. T12 furnished the following information. On March 19, 1964, Alejandro Saucedo, manager of the Flecha Roja bus terminal, Mexico City, advised that the original passenger manifest of bus number 516, which had traveled from Nuevo Laredo to Mexico City on September 26 and 27, 63, had been borrowed by investigators of the Mexican government soon after the assassination of the president, John F. Kennedy. He could not recall the identities of the investigators and did not know whether or not they intended to return the list. Saucedo stated the duplicate copy of his passenger list was maintained in the office of the Flecha Roja bus line at Nuevo Laredo, and he would attempt to obtain this copy. On March 24th, 1964, Alejandro Saucedo stated he had determined from the Flecha Roja bus line office in Nuevo Laredo that the duplicate copy of the passenger list for bus number 516 had also been borrowed by unidentified investigators of the Mexican government and had not been returned. Saucedo stated he had assisted the Mexican government investigators in searching for the passenger list relating to the trip of September 26 to 27, 63, and was quite certain the name Lee Harvey Oswald did not appear thereon. He added, however, that Flecha Roja bus line makes connection at Laredo, Texas, with the Continental Trailways bus line in the United States, and if a passenger who had purchased through tickets to Mexico City from a point within the United States were to board the Flecha Roja line at Laredo or Nuevo Laredo, no record of that passenger by that name would be made on the passenger list. He explained that the passenger list would include a seat designation, a ticket number in the name of Continental. T12 advised on April 2nd, 64, and thereafter Alejandro Saucedo furnished the following additional data. He recalled that shortly after the assassination of President John Kennedy, two investigators, whom he described as being with the Policia Federal Judicial, the Federal Judicial Police, appeared at the Flecha Roja terminal, Mexico City, and requested the original passenger list of bus number 516 of September 26, 1963 for review. Saucedo remembered that the two investigators examined the passenger lists filed by dates in a storeroom at the offices of Flecha Roja bus terminal and found the original copy for the pertinent date and borrowed the same. He could not recall the names of the investigators or the exact date they appeared at the office. Saucedo now recalled clearly that these two investigators, whom he could only describe as being in their 30s, had the duplicate copy of the passenger list, which apparently had been at the Flecha Roja bus terminal office in Nuevo Laredo when the trip for September 26, 63 began. The investigators stated they wanted the original list because the duplicate copy was not completely legible. Saucedo stated that the original and duplicate copy of the passenger manifest for Flecha Roja bus number 516 for September 26, 1963, when they left. Saucedo stated the investigators did exhibit to him government credentials, agency not recalled, and advised they were interested in finding the passenger list for the incoming trip of bus number 516 on September 26, 63. When Saucedo asked them if they were interested in locating a departure trip, they stated they were not, explaining they had just been at the bus terminal of Transporte Frontera in Mexico City, where they had located the passenger list for Oswald's departure from Mexico. Let me read the chat here. Jack Ruby was at the Jack Ruby was the Mexico City Oswald. And that's totally false. On April 9th, 64, Julio Castro, an employee of the accounting department in the offices of the Flecha Roja bus line terminal, Mexico City, made available on instructions of Alejandro Saucedo the original passenger lists of the Flecha Roja bus line, which were kept in the storeroom across the hall from accounting office and were maintained in a disorganized manner, bound with heavy string in bundles and stored in bins. The available bundles for the period September-October 1963 were reviewed without locating a passenger list for bus number 516 relating to September 26, 63. During the search and review, an untied loose bundle dated October 5th, 63 was located, thrown aside in a cardboard box on the floor of the storage room outside the bin area. This bundle was reviewed and found to include passenger lists for dates September 21st, 63 to October 5th, 63, but no passenger list for bus number 516 for September 26, 63 was found. The information here under was furnished by T13. On March 24th, 63, Captain Fernando Gutierrez Barrios, Assistant Director of the Mexican Federal Security Police, advised that his agency had conducted no investigation in connection with the travel in Mexico of Lee Harvey Oswald and did not have in its possession any passenger lists from any bus lines. On April 14, 64, the passenger lists of the September 26, 63 Flecha Roja trip from Nuevo Laredo to Mexico City had never appeared and were alleged to be in the hands of an unidentified investigative agency of the Mexican government was brought to the attention of the acting Minister of Government, Attorney Luis Echevarria, who issued instructions to the chief of the inspection department of the Immigration Service, Attorney Santiago Ibanez Lamas, to make every effort to locate the passenger list as described above. On May 1st, 64, Inspector Jose Mario Del Val advised that he had been instructed to attempt to locate the Flecha Roja passenger list and was making every effort to do so. Transporte del Norte passengers originating in Guadalajara. On April 3rd, 64, T8 advised that the Linea Azul Blue Line bus company affords service from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, to San Luis Potosi, state of San Luis Potosi, Mexico, to make connections with Transporte del Norte for possible further travel to Monterrey and Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, according to T8. A reservations list for the October 2nd, 1963, 8 a.m. departure of the Blue Line bus from Guadalajara with San Luis Potosi as its destination reflects the following information, as best the names and other data thereon could be deciphered. Doesn't look like any American names on here. Comprehensive investigation, including a check of the files of the United States consulate visa records, a check of telephone directories, and numerous interviews of persons listed in the telephone directories with similar names, were conducted at Guadalajara for the above names of persons traveling beyond San Luis Potosi without identifying anyone who had been a passenger of Transporte del Norte on October 2nd, 1963. Transporte del Norte bus line operation, Monterrey. The following information was furnished by T18. On April 9th, 1964, Ramon Trevina Quezada, vice president and manager of the Monterrey Nuevo Leon terminal of Transporte del Norte bus line, advised that tickets are taken up by the driver from passengers at the time they board the bus, and he deposits them in manila envelope, which is provided for that purpose in connection with each trip of unit and driver. He stated the driver makes a notation on the outside of the envelope as to the number of passengers traveling over a determined section of the route, and the tickets inside the envelope should coincide or balance with the notation by the driver on the envelope. With respect to the records of the company for the trip of bus number 373 on October 2nd, 1963, from Monterrey to Nuevo Laredo, Trevino advised that he was unable to explain the fact that the envelope carries the figure of 12 passengers from Monterrey, Nuevo Leon to Nuevo Laredo, and Laredo, Texas, and one passenger from Nuevo Laredo to Laredo, although a total of 20 ticket sections were in the envelope for that particular trip. He stated, however, that the notation by the driver is a clerical function which he handles during the trip, often at night and under considerable stress and pressure. He can only conclude that the driver made an error in writing 12 rather than 19 upon completing his collection of tickets and delivering the envelope at the conclusion of his run. It was mentioned to Trevino that the baggage manifest for the bus, which arrived at Nuevo Laredo in the early morning of October 3rd, 63, had listed the number of that bus as number 396, and he advised that this notation could only be a clerical error by the baggage handler. He displayed a copy of a document referred to as traffic report for Transporte del Norte at its Nuevo Laredo terminal for October 3rd, 1963, which recorded that bus number 373 had arrived at the terminal at 1:35 a.m. with A. Ibarra as the driver. The traffic report for October 2nd, 1963, registered the arrival of bus number 396 at Nuevo Laredo as having taken place at 3:30 p.m. On that date, and its departure from Nuevo Laredo for Monterrey was recorded on the report for the following day as having occurred at 2:30 a.m. He pointed out that on the basis of the foregoing records, bus number 396 would still have been at the Nuevo Laredo terminal at the time of the arrival on October 3rd, 1963, of bus number 373, and he assumed the baggage handler had become confused between them when he made the erroneous notation on the baggage manifest. There's a lot of confused people making a lot of wrong notes on this one bus trip. Coincidence? I don't think so. Ticketing procedures by Transporte del Norte bus line. The following information was furnished by T13. On April 20th, 64, Ramon Medina Beltran, manager of the Mexico City terminal of the Transporte del Norte bus line, advised that this company is affiliated with the Greyhound lines in the United States and is authorized and in positions to sell transportation to any point in the United States. He stated that until approximately 1 year ago, the sale of bus transportation in the U.S. On behalf of Greyhound lines had been effected through a system of exchange or purchase orders. However, in the interest of simplifying the sales and accounting procedures, Transporte del Norte ticket counters are now stocked with Greyhound Lines tickets and make direct sales on behalf of Greyhound, as well as its own facilities. He stated very definitely that the only record as to the identity of any person purchasing Greyhound transportation through Transporte del Norte ticket counter would be the record of the seat reservation on a passenger list at the point of origin or purchase of the ticket. Miscellaneous inquiries at Mexico City concerning Oswald. Telephone numbers in Oswald's address book. The following notations appeared in the personal address book of Lee Harvey Oswald. Translations of the Spanish language items appear in parentheses. Hang on one second. My dog was tied up in my wires again. Telephone numbers in Oswald's address book. The following notations appeared in the personal address book of Lee Harvey Oswald. Translations of the Spanish language items appear in parentheses. It says Mexico City, Consulado de Cuba, 11/28/47, Sylvia Duran. So they're saying that Sylvia Duran's name appeared in Oswald's personal address book. I don't know what to think of Oswald's personal address book. I'll have to dig into that sometime because I doubt Oswald ever knew Sylvia Duran or any of this stuff at all. So it had to have been planted there. The directory of the Mexican Telephone Company for the Federal District and Mexican Federal Capital, which includes Mexico City, published in September of 1963, column 2, page 119, records Consulado de Cuba, Zamora YF, Marquez, names of cross streets in a telephone 11/28/47. Column 1, page 157 of the same directory reflects Embajada de la Unión de las Repúblicas Soviéticas Socialistas en Mexico. Whatever. Embassy of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic in Mexico. Looks like we just have a bunch of more names and addresses. Column 4, page 112, the above-mentioned directory records the following. CIA, Cubana de Aviación. So these are entries allegedly from Oswald's address book, which I don't buy any of this stuff at all. Zero. This is all stuff that was planted by Kerry Thornley that had no choice but to have been. The April 1st, 1964 issue of Diario Oficial Official Daily, which states on the cover that it is the organ of the constitutional government of the United States of Mexico, records as emanating from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs the list of the diplomatic corps accredited to the government of the United States of Mexico. On page 15 of the above described publication under Unión de Repúblicas Socialistas Soviéticas is recorded the data. I'm not reading any more fucking Spanish. Fuck you. The foregoing data is followed by a listing of names and residence addresses of the Soviet diplomatic officials and their wives. T16, who was in a position to be well informed with respect to the day-to-day operations of the Mexico City ticket offices of the Compañía Cubana de Aviación, Cuban Aviation Company, commonly referred to as Cubana Airlines, furnished the following information on April 18, 1964. Most of the office employees at the Cubana Airlines ticket office, Paseo de la Reforma 56, Mexico City, are Mexican citizens. Source would have an excellent possibility of being informed of any visits or inquiries made at the Cubana Airlines office by an American and is thoroughly convinced that Lee Harvey Oswald did not appear at those offices during late September and early October 63 within the regular working hours. Source viewed various photographs of Oswald and consulted with associates at the Cubana Airlines office and reiterated the conviction that Oswald had not been at those offices at any time. This source confirmed that the published and most used telephone number for the Cubana Airlines office is 357900. Possibility that Oswald sent or received money. T11 reported that on January 13, 64, Alfonso Frias, assistant chief of the Bank of Mexico police at Mexico City, advised that a check of the records of Telegrafos Nacional failed to disclose any record of money sent or received by Oswald during the time he was in Mexico through use of communication channels handled by that telegraph system. On March 6, 64, Frias advised that all banks in Mexico, including all branch banks, were checked officially for Lee Harvey Oswald and his aliases of O.H. Lee, Alec James Heidel. No information was developed that Oswald had received or sent any money through those banks during the time he was in Mexico. You're completely wrong. The documents tell you everything, and the documents clearly paint a picture that Kerry Thornley was the one in Mexico City. So you need to read my book if you haven't. Inquiries at the Hotel Cuba. Patricia Winston and Pamela Mumford, who were passengers on the same bus with Oswald from Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico to Mexico City, September 26, 27th, 1963, when interviewed on December 17, 63, related that during the bus trip, Oswald recommended that they stay at the Hotel Cuba in Mexico City. They related that Oswald claimed he had stayed at that hotel several times before and pointed out that the hotel was inexpensive, mentioning, however, that he was not staying at the Hotel Cuba during his current trip. Inquiry was conducted to establish whether Oswald had in fact stayed at the Hotel Cuba during a period following his return to the United States from Russia in June 62 to November 63. On December 27, 63, T4 advised that an exhaustive search of the records of the Hotel Cuba, located at Calle República de Cuba No. 69, Mexico City, for the period of June 62 to October 63, failed to disclose any registration for Oswald under his name or known aliases. T12 advised as follows. On March 11, 64, Angel Solorio, manager Hotel Cuba, made available records of that hotel, which were rechecked for the period June 9, 62 to November 22, 63, and no record could be located for the name of Lee Harvey Oswald or his known aliases O.H. Lee and Alec James Heidel. The records did contain a registration for one Roberto Lee, who registered at the hotel on August 11, 63, was assigned room number 27, and checked out of the hotel on August 21, 63. No further identifying data regarding this Lee was contained in the records. Oswald had been reported as being at New Orleans, Louisiana during that period. August 21st, 63. Really, there's not much information on... we know he was in New Orleans, but we really don't know what Oswald was up to at that time. Solorio advised that he had been at the Hotel Cubana only since November 11, 63, when he became manager, and prior thereto, Jose Sanchez, who was presently associated with another hotel in Mexico City, served as manager for about a 4-month period, and Mr. Rafael Avalos, also now employed at another hotel in Mexico City, had served as manager for a number of years. On March 12, 64, both Rafael Avalos, manager Hotel Congreso Calle de Allende, number 18, Mexico City, and Jose Sanchez, manager Hotel Catedral Calle Donceles, number 95, viewed a photograph of Oswald, and both advised they could not recognize the photograph of being as anyone who stayed at the Hotel Cuba during the time they were managing the hotel. Both were of the opinion that if Oswald had stayed at the Hotel Cubana during the time they were in charge there, they would have recalled him. Neither could furnish any pertinent information regarding the possibility Oswald may have stayed at the Hotel Cuba in the past. Avalos related he had served as manager at the Hotel Cuba for a number of years until July 62, and Sanchez stated he had managed the hotel from June 1st, 63 to November 11th, 63. Sanchez stated that during the period July 62 to June 1st, he became manager. The administration of the hotel had been disorganized and there was no permanent manager. He also stated that Jesus Hernandez Sanchez and his brother, Higinio Hernandez Sanchez, both of whom he believed were still employed at the Hotel Cuba, would most logically be the persons in the best position to know whether or not Oswald stayed at the Hotel Cuba during the period of July 1962 to June 1st, 63. Jesus Hernandez Sanchez, room clerk, Hotel Cuba, advised on March 13, 64 that he's been employed as room clerk at that hotel for several years. He stated that during the period from July 62 to June 1st, 63, when the hotel had no permanent manager, he and his brother, Hernandez Sanchez, performed the administrative functions at the hotel and had most contact with the guests. Hernandez viewed the photograph of Oswald and stated he could not recall ever seeing him. He further stated that he could not recognize the photographs of being as any person who had been at the Hotel Cuba during the time he has been employed there. He advised that several months ago, he and his brother Higinio had been shown a photograph of Oswald by a local police official, and at the time, both he and his brother were unable to recognize the photograph of Oswald as being any person who had stayed at the hotel during the period they had been working there. He added that following the publicity arising from the assassination of President Kennedy, seeing Oswald's photograph in the newspapers and after viewing a photograph of Oswald exhibited by a police official mentioned above, he and his brother had discussed the matter and had agreed that he could not recall Oswald ever having stayed at the Hotel Cuba. Highlight in Mexico City. T12 advised in connection with the possibility that Oswald might have attended a highlight game in Mexico City that the Mexico City Daily Bulletin, a free English publication circulated at hotels, motels, drugstores, and tourist-type stores in Mexico City, lists daily the following as a sport event of interest. Highlight, the ancient game from Spain, can be seen every day, but Monday at Fronton, Mexico, Plaza de la República at 7:30 p.m. Men players, and every afternoon except Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. at Fronton Metropolitano, Bahia, Todos Santos 190, women players. Betting at both. T12 provided the following data. On March 1964, Guadalupe Gaetan Sanchez, caretaker and resident at the Front in Mexico Plaza de República for 30 years, was unable to identify the photograph of Oswald. Gaetan Sanchez stated that Enrique Martinez de Villagrain has been the doorman at the Front in Mexico for 20 years and as such observed every person who enters to determine that this person is properly dressed and not the type who might cause a disturbance at the highlight game. On March 1964, Enrique Martinez de Villagrain was unable to identify Oswald's photograph, but stated the photograph appeared similar to an American who had entered the Fronton, Mexico 5 or 6 months previously on several occasions for the period of a week and a day. He was not certain the American could be identical with Oswald, nor did he have any specific information about the American, his whereabouts, or his background. On March 20th, 64, Ignacio Valdillo B., the general cashier for the Fronton Metropolitana, stated that highlight is not played at this Fronton. The game played there is frontennis, which differs from highlight in that the players do not use a cesta, a basket fastened to the hand of the player, but a racket similar to a tennis racket is used. Valdillo B. stated a few, if any, Americans frequent the Fronton Metropolitano, and those who do are usually remembered. Valdillo B. was unable to identify the photograph of Oswald as an American who might have been at the Fronton Metropolitano. He suggested that Oswald's photograph be displayed to Mr. Romero, an inspector for the Treasury Department of the Federal District of Mexico, because Tapia Romero is always on duty at the front door of the Fronton Metropolitano to observe all customers as they enter. Mr. Romano viewed the photograph of Oswald on March 20th, 64, and stated definitely that Oswald had not been at the Fronton Metropolitano. Oswald's luggage. The following information was furnished by T13 on May 4th, 64. Juan Perez Gonzalez advised that he is the chief of the baggage department at the terminal of the Flecha Roja bus line, Calle Heroes, whatever. Perez viewed photographs of an olive-colored B4 bag with yellow chalk or crayon markings on one side, which appeared to be 923, and possibly an initial of fragments of stickers in thereon, and of a blue zippered handbag, and affirmed that he has no recollection of those pieces of luggage and did not recognize any of the markings, stickers, or tags as being in any way connected with the Flecha Roja operations. He stated, however, that he recently entered Mexico at Nuevo Laredo with a small zippered handbag of canvas material, and when he went through Mexican customs, the inspector placed a green chalk or crayon marking on the bag to indicate it had been inspected. Perez displayed the various photographs to the baggage handlers on duty at the terminal, and they stated they were unable to recall the luggage in question or make any explanation of the tags, stickers, and inscriptions on them. On May 8th, 64, the manager of the Mexico City terminal of the Transporte del Norte bus line, number 137, viewed the photographs mentioned above and advised he did not have any recollection with respect to the two pieces of luggage described above, nor did he believe that any of the fragments of stickers and tags thereon were connected in any way with the Transporte del Norte baggage handling procedures. He expressed the belief that the yellow chalk markings on the olive-colored bag were typical of the method used by Mexican customs inspectors at Nuevo Laredo to mark luggage when completing examination thereof, in lieu of a sticker, which they sometimes used. The manager, Ricardo Medina Beltran, displayed the photographs to the baggage handlers on duty, and they affirmed that they were unable to recognize either piece of luggage in connection with any passenger, but stated unanimously that they recognized the crayon or chalk markings on the olive-colored bag as typical of the inspection procedure of the Mexican customs at Nuevo Laredo. Medina also displayed the photographs to several Transporte del Norte drivers, and they were of the opinion that the yellow inscriptions on the olive-colored bag had been placed there by the Mexican customs inspector at Nuevo Laredo. On May 4th, 1964, Sebastian Perez Hernandez, assistant desk clerk at the Hotel de Comercio, Calle Bernardino, advised that he could not recognize the photographs of either the olive color or the blue-colored luggage as having been seen in the possession of a guest at the hotel. On May 8th, 64, Guillermo Luna, owner of the Hotel de Comercio, affirmed that he was unable to recognize the photographs of the two bags as having any connection with Oswald or any other guest at the Hotel de Comercio. Matilda Garniza, maid at the Hotel de Comercio, who claimed to remember Oswald as a guest at the hotel in room number 18, examined the photographs of the luggage on May 8th, 64, and stated she recognized the small blue zippered handbag as the luggage which Oswald had in his room at the hotel. She pointed out that she had been impressed by the fact that he had very few personal effects, had noticed he did some laundry each day, and left the wet articles hanging in the bathroom. And she was quite certain she had not seen the larger olive-colored bag. On May 9th, 64, Pedro Rodriguez Ledesma, night watchman at the Hotel de Comercio, explained the photographs referred to above and stated he was quite certain Oswald had been carrying the blue handbag on the morning of his departure from the hotel. He claimed to be unable to definitely affirm that Oswald had been carrying the olive-colored bag, as he could not remember several of its characteristics, but he expressed the firm conviction that Oswald had been carrying two pieces of luggage. He related that on the morning of his departure, Oswald carried his own luggage down the 2 flights of stairs and waited in the reception area while Rodriguez went in search of a taxi. When Rodriguez returned with the taxi, he carried the luggage from the reception area to the taxi, but still has the strong impression that he had a bag in each hand. Rodriguez admitted his recollection of the type and color of the luggage is very hazy, and he does not wish to state definitively that he recognizes the photograph of either piece of luggage in connection with Oswald. Arrests, interrogation, and physical condition of Sylvia Duran. With respect to the alleged arrest of Sylvia T. Duran, the Mexico City daily newspaper Novedades for November 30th, 63, page 1, published an article translated from Spanish as follows. The Gobernación Interior advises concerning case of Mrs. Sylvia T. Duran. The Ministry of Gobernación advised last night that Mrs. Sylvia Tirado de Duran, who was interviewed concerning the possibility that she might have had dealings with Lee Harvey Oswald during his stay in our country as a tourist, was not located at the Cuban consulate, nor did she request authorization to serve a foreign government, and that in view thereof, the investigation which was made was not in respect to her status as employee of the Cuban consulate in Mexico. The announcement concluded by saying that the woman in question agreed to go to the office to which she was summoned, and she was interrogated without any force whatsoever. On December 9th, 63, David Alcon appeared voluntarily at the United States Embassy, Mexico City, identified himself as an architect residing at Calle Fernandez Gonzalez Roja, number 47, and furnished the following information. Alcon is a designer of residential homes and has a business arrangement with one Horacio Duran for the interior decoration of houses designed by Alcon. Duran is the husband of Sylvia Tirado de Duran. Alcon stated he has no social association with Duran, but understands Duran is pro-communist and often holds Marxist discussions in his home. Alcon advised that Duran had mentioned to him that his wife had been detained and questioned by Mexico City police about her knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald. Duran told Alcon his wife knew Oswald because the latter had been to the Cuban embassy in an attempt to secure a visa for travel to Cuba. Alcon gained the impression that the wife was not well acquainted with Oswald, but only recalled he had been at the Cuban embassy after she read of the assassination of President Kennedy. Alcon advised that it was his impression that the wife's contact with Oswald related only to the application for a visa and that her contact with him was very slight. Alcon said Duran commented to him that he thought it was a mistake for Cuba to protest to Mexico about his wife's being questioned by Mexican authorities, since the latter had a perfect right to question her about her knowledge of Oswald. According to press reports, the Cuban government presented a very strong note of protest to the Mexican ambassador in Havana with regard to the detention and questioning of Sylvia Tirado de Duran by Mexican authorities. And this note was rejected by the Mexican government because of the unacceptable language utilized therein. On April 4th, 1964, the following information was provided by T13. William D. Shanahan, editor of the Mexico City daily English-language newspaper, The News, related that on April 3rd, 1964, Daniel Nava Ramos, reporter for the Mexico City daily Novedades, had attempted to contact Sylvia Duran and her husband, Horacio Duran, at their residence in an effort to obtain interesting human interest material for a newspaper article he was writing with respect to the Oswald case. Nava had experienced considerable difficulty in seeing the Durans and was allowed to enter their apartment with the understanding that he will remain no longer than 15 minutes. He was not permitted to speak directly to Sylvia Duran and was advised by her husband that she had suffered a nervous breakdown following her interrogation by Mexican authorities and had been prohibited by her physician and Duran himself from discussing the Oswald matter further. Information concerning Charles Small, bracelet, postcards, and racetrack pamphlet. T22 reported that as a result of the assassination of President Kennedy and the publication of the facts concerning Oswald's leftist connection and his prior residence in the Soviet Union, many members of the American Communist group in Mexico were extremely fearful, expecting police harassment of all leftists. Source identified Charles Small, true name's Charles Nelson Smolikoff, who was born in Brooklyn, New York on March 16, 1911, as being one of the most prominent associates of the ACGM. Is that what that says? According to the source, Small is a United States citizen who resides in Mexico City and operates a tourist-type store at Calle Niza number 47, where he sells silver jewelry and other gift items. So here, once again, we got a guy using an alias. An American in Mexico City using an alias, right? Source advised that in the past, some, but not all, American communists visiting Mexico City have appeared at Small's place of business, and Small has assisted these individuals in connecting with their problems while in Mexico City. T22 learned that in mid-December 1963, Small had expressed concern that Oswald might have visited his store in Mexico, as many American communists, when in Mexico City, appear at his store. In early January 1964, according to source, Small continued to worry that he might have known Oswald at some time and that Oswald may have visited the store while in Mexico City. Sources stated Small had no definite information in this regard and was only speculating on the matter. Source was unable to develop any specific information to indicate that Small might actually have known Oswald, that Small knew anyone who knew Oswald, or that Oswald had visited Small's store in Mexico City. Source considers Small's concern about the possibility that Oswald might have visited his store to be part of the general concern of members at the ACGM after reading that Oswald had been in Mexico. The ACGM is a loose association of predominantly social nature of present and or past members of the Communist Party, USA, and their friends and associates who share a common sympathy for communism in the Soviet Union. In connection with the possibility that a silver-colored bracelet considered to be of Japanese origin was given by Oswald to his wife, Marina Nikolovna Oswald, upon his return to Dallas, Texas from Mexico about October 3rd, 1963, T22 advised that Small was not known to handle imported Japanese merchandise in his store in Mexico City, which merchandise would be similar to the type of bracelet given to Mrs. Oswald, and added as follows. Postcards had never been observed on sale in Small's store at any time, and this would seem to obviate Oswald's having purchased at Small's store 6 colored postcards depicting scenes in Mexico which were reportedly among Oswald's possessions. Small had not been known to have available for sale or distribution any pamphlets exactly like or similar to the pamphlet reportedly located among Oswald's possessions with the inscription on the cover page, Hippodromo de las Americas, Mexico City. Sources advised that additional inquiries would be made at Small's store for any possibility that Oswald could have purchased or obtained the above-mentioned bracelet, postcard, and or pamphlet at his store, and that a check would also be made for these items at the 4 known outlets of the Japanese merchandise in Mexico City. Sources subsequently advised that careful review had been made of all the bracelets in Small's store. None of these was of Japanese origin or appeared in any way similar to a photograph of the above-mentioned bracelet. According to T22, complete verification had been made of previous observations that no postcards exist and none are sold at small store in Mexico City. T22 advised that 6 colored postcards depicting various scenes in Mexico, which were in Oswald's possession, were designed and manufactured by one Fischgrund, one of the 2 largest manufacturers of postcards in Mexico, and that these postcards are sold in great number of stores in Mexico. Source stated that a check of 4 known outlets of Japanese merchandise in Mexico City was made, and that these outlets do not handle any type of bracelet, which would be similar to the one which Oswald gave his wife. T23, a confidential source who has furnished reliable information in the past, advised that 244 stores, including jewelry stores, tourist-type gift shops, and stores handling silverware in Mexico City, were contacted during the period March 6 to 1364 without locating any store which carries a type of bracelet which Oswald gave his wife. This source concluded that Oswald could not have purchased a bracelet in Mexico since the import tax on such an article not manufactured in Mexico would be prohibitive for resale at a profit, unless Oswald bought it from an ambulatory street vendor, in which case the bracelet might have been smuggled into Mexico by a Japanese sailor at the port of Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico. If the latter occurred, Oswald might have had a problem upon presenting the bracelet to an engraver in Mexico because he would have been handling smuggled merchandise. T24, a confidential source who has furnished reliable information in the past, contacted 59 stores in Mexico City during the period March 7th through March 14th, 64, which included jewelry stores, stores selling silverware, and stores handling engraving, and was unable to locate any store which carried the type of bracelet Oswald gave his wife. As a result, source did not believe Oswald could have purchased the bracelet in Mexico because the import tax on a bracelet not manufactured in Mexico would prohibit resale at a profit. T24 stated that if Oswald bought the bracelet in Mexico, he could have purchased it from a street vendor who could have obtained it from a Japanese seaman in Acapulco, in which case Oswald would have a problem getting it engraved in Mexico because it was smuggled. I fucking hate when they duplicate paragraphs like that. T13 advised that on March 1964, Daniel Galindo, assistant manager of the Hippodrome de las Americas, a thoroughbred racetrack, stated he was familiar with the pamphlet entitled whatever. Galindo related that this pamphlet was published by the racetrack 3 or 4 years ago, explaining in English and in Spanish the rules for betting in 1-2 selection and quinellas. This pamphlet was given wide distribution at the racetrack and at souvenir shops, hotels, motels, drugstores, and restaurants, and for a time was inserted in the programs on racing days for patrons of the track. The racetrack still has some copies of this pamphlet on hand, but has not distributed it for recent years. The same information recorded in the pamphlet is now published in the racing program for a given day whenever space is available for that purpose. Galindo stated such a pamphlet could have possibly been picked up from any of the numerous localities in Mexico City where the pamphlet was previously distributed if copies were still available, but all the localities are now unknown to him. Allegation by Pedro Gutierrez Valencia. Basis for inquiry. On January 23rd, 64, Eldridge A. Snight, Regional Security Officer, United States Embassy, Mexico City, Mexico, made available a letter written in the Spanish language dated December 2nd, 63, which had been directed to President Lyndon Johnson by Pedro Gutierrez Valencia, who described himself as a credit investigator for a Mexico City department store. The letter states that he was at the Cuban Embassy in Mexico City on September 30th, 63, or October 1st, 63, to conduct a credit investigation concerning an employee of that embassy. And upon leaving, he observed a Cuban in the company of a person he judged to be an American also leaving the premises of the Cuban Embassy. According to this letter, these two individuals were engaged in a heated discussion involving Castro, Cuba, and Kennedy. Gutierrez alleged that the Cuban observed by him at the time was counting American currency, and both persons departed from the area in an automobile. The letter continued that he had later seen photographs of Lee Harvey Oswald and had concluded that the American seen with the Cuban was Lee Harvey Oswald. Inquiry on January 27, 64, at the credit department of Mexico City department store known as Palacio de Niero, Calle Durango, number 230, revealed that Gutierrez is known there as a credit investigator. T4 furnished the information, which as follows. Interview of Gutierrez Valencia. On January 29, 64, Pedro Gutierrez Valencia, who resides in Mexico City at Calle Florida number 9, Colonia Napolis, Mexico City, advised that he... Oh, shit. I lost my place because my goddamn dog. Where the fuck was I? All right, let's start here. Gutierrez related that when he was an assistant commandant of the penitentiary, Dr. Esther Chapa, whom he described as a well-known communist, was the whole parole board director at the prison. He said that Dr. Chapa formally accused him of being anti-communist at that time, which was a correct charge since he most certainly was anti-communist. He stated that Dr. Chapa was finally dismissed from her position by her superiors. Gutierrez explained that he had offered the above facts for the purpose of substantiating his avowed anti-communist sentiments during a long period of time. Gutierrez acknowledged that he was the author of the aforementioned letter dated December 2nd, 1963, directed to President Lyndon Johnson. Gutierrez stated that on September 30th, 1963, or October 1st, 1963, he had occasion to go to the Cuban embassy in Mexico City in connection with a credit investigation of a female employee of that embassy, and needing to interview this woman at the Cuban embassy at about 10:30 a.m., he had parked his car on Calle Francisco Marquez just outside the parking area reserved for use of the Cuban embassy vehicles. On February 3rd, 1964, Gutierrez stated that he now estimates that he entered the premises of the Cuban embassy about 10:30 or 10:35 a.m. on October 1st, 1963, and departed about 10:50 a.m., explaining that he had been able to fix the time rather closely because he had located a credit report on an individual he was investigating that date in Coyoacan, municipality in the Federal District, and estimated he was in Coyoacan about 11:15 a.m. on October 1st, 1963. On January 29th, 1964, Gutierrez related that upon entering the Cuban embassy on October 1st, 1963, he was able to locate the woman about whom he was inquiring, and she displayed him a card which identified her as a second counselor of the Cuban embassy. But when asked her to show her carnet to identify her as an employee of the Cuban embassy accredited to the Mexican government, she said that an application had been made to the Mexican Foreign Office, but that her status had not at that time been recognized or accredited by the Mexican government. Gutierrez explained that this was an obvious falsehood, as he had checked at the Mexican Foreign Office previously and had found that no information was on record. Gutierrez stated that he had told the credit applicant that she would require a fiador guarantor in order to have her credit application approved, and she indicated that she could not furnish a fiador, for which reason the credit application was not approved by the department store and no further action was taken in connection therewith. On February 3rd, 1964, Gutierrez advised that an exhaustive search of the credit reports made by him in September and October 1963 revealed that the credit report he made on a female employee of the Cuban embassy at Mexico City on or about October 1st, 1963, had been destroyed because of the fact her credit application had been rejected. He believed she was employed at the commercial department of the Cuban embassy, that being the section he visited when he went there to contact her. Gutierrez further related as follows: upon leaving the Cuban embassy, he paused in the courtyard which leads to the outside sidewalk, and while in the process of lighting his cigarette lighter, was bumped by a person who was also leaving the Cuban embassy and was accompanied by an adult male American. Gutierrez subsequently viewed photographs of Oswald and advised that it was his opinion that Oswald was the aforementioned American. It was his opinion that the person accompanying the American was a Cuban, basing this assumption on an expression used by this person after bumping into Gutierrez in the courtyard, as when Gutierrez excused himself, the person responded in Spanish, "Está bien, chico," that's all right, buddy, a common expression used by Cubans to indicate no harm was done. He describes this Cuban as male, white, appeared to be about 33, short, 5'3" to 5'5", very stocky, appeared to be a person of considerable physical strength, hair black and curly, very light for a Cuban, wore dark-colored business suit with a sport shirt open at the collar, no necktie, wore no hat, spoke English fluently and rapidly, also spoke Spanish with a Cuban accent. Gutierrez described the American who was accompanying this individual as a male, white, presumably a U.S. citizen, 27 to 30 years old, very light complected, unknown, 5'9" to 5'10" inches tall. Which one of the Oswald lookalikes is 5'9" to 5'10" inches tall? Only one, Kerry Thornley. Build slender. Gutierrez claimed to be unable to estimate weight, but stated the American was not at all fat or stocky. Hair was dark brown, and he wore beige khaki-colored slacks and shirt of unrecalled type or short jacket with windbreaker, wore no hat. Remarks appeared nervous and had appeared of being aggressive. He was heard to speak only English. Gutierrez said that when they passed him, the two individuals were engaged in a heated discussion in English, and Gutierrez heard the words Castro and Kennedy mentioned. He claimed he noticed that the Cuban had some American currency in his hand and appeared to be examining or counting this money. He said that after the Cuban and the American exited through the gate to the sidewalk on Calle Francisco Marquez, he observed the Cuban hand the money to the American, and the American took this money with his left hand, folded it, and pushed it into his left trouser pocket. Gutierrez related that this exchange interested him, and he followed the two individuals along Calle Francisco Marquez until they turned left at the corner, where he observed that they entered an automobile, which he described as being a Dina Renault, light beige in color and fairly new or current model. The Cuban was on the driver's side. The license plates had white numerals on a black background, the coloring of the 62 to 63 Mexican plates, but Gutierrez could furnish no information as to whether the plates were for the Federal District of Mexico, whether they were plates that might have been diplomatic, or whether they might have been from some state or territory of Mexico. After the American and Cuban got into the car, they apparently drove away and he did not see them further. Gutierrez advised he believes that the person he considered to be Oswald referred to the Cuban as Ernie. On at least two occasions during the conversation, which he overheard, he expressed the opinion that the use of the name Ernie may indicate the Cuban's name be Ernesto, which would be normal Spanish name for a person who might be known as Ernie or Ernst. All right, so it looks like we're wrapped up with that section, moving on to another one, the character and reputation of Gutierrez, and so that we're going to save for tomorrow. So that's going to do it for today, guys. If you haven't bought my book yet, it's on Amazon. You guys know the deal. And all right, I'll see you tomorrow.